The celestial tier hung in the void like a shard of living crystal, its hull pulsing with the rhythmic heartbeat of bioluminescent energy. High Commander Zakel of the Zapirian Ascendancy watched from the command spire, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the blue-green glow of the ship's core. The vessel was a masterpiece of his people's technology, crystalline, elegant, designed for precision and efficiency. And yet, as the long-range scanners painted the image of the approaching human fleet, Zakel felt the first stirrings of unease. The humans were supposed to be primitive. That was the intelligence the Ascendancy had gathered over decades of passive observation. Their wars were chaotic. Their technology crude ballistic weapons, fission-based explosives, propulsion systems that barely breached the threshold of interstellar travel. The Zapirian High Council had dismissed them as another upstart species, too reckless to be a threat, too divided to be worth conquering. And yet, the ships now moving into engagement range were anything but primitive. Quilex, the ship's chief xenologist, adjusted the crystalline display with a flick of his chitinous fingers. The holographic projection shimmered, revealing the human vessels in stark detail. They were angular, brutal things, forged from dark alloys that drank in the light rather than reflecting it. No elegant curves, no pulsing energy signatures, just cold, hard metal and the unmistakable silhouette of weapons. Too many weapons. Zakel's mandibles twitched. Analysis, he commanded, his voice a low hum of subsonic resonance. Quilex hesitated, an uncharacteristic lapse for a scientist of his standing. Their armor composition is unusual. Layered composites, ablative plating, reactive shielding. It's not just designed to withstand fire, it's designed to adapt. Zakel's crest of sensory spines flattened against his skull. Adaptability was a trait of predators. The tactical display flickered again, highlighting the primary human warship designation, UNS Vanguard. Its hull was scarred, pitted with the remnants of old battles, yet it moved with the quiet confidence of something that had survived far worse than a first contact skirmish. And then the scans reached its weapons. Railgun batteries, plasma lances, missile silos clustered like the venom sacs of some ancient armored beast. But it was the secondary systems that made Quilex's bioluminescent markings flicker in alarm. Commander, they have boarding pods. Zakel's spine stiffened. Boarding was a tactic of desperation or absolute confidence. No civilized species risked close quarters combat when energy weapons could decide battles from 1,000 kilometers away. Yet the humans had not only prepared for it, they had optimized for it. The Vanguard's pods were not mere transport vessels. They were armored spears, designed to punch through hulls and disgorge soldiers clad in powered exoskeletons, wielding weapons that could level entire decks. The Zapirians had no equivalent. Their warriors were scholars, their battles fought with logic and precision. The humans, it seemed, had built their entire doctrine around winning at any cost. A chime echoed through the command spire. The human fleet had entered firing range. Zakel hesitated. This was not how first contact was meant to proceed. There should have been diplomacy, an exchange of knowledge, the measured integration of a lesser species into the Ascendance's enlightened fold. But the humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to fight. And as the Vanguard's weapons powered up, their reactors flaring like miniature stars, Zakel realized with dawning horror that his people had made a fatal miscalculation. They had assumed humanity was weak because they had once been primitive. They had not considered what kind of species survives, being primitive, and claws its way to the stars regardless. Section, Fey, the ignition, the Vanguard's weapon arrays hummed to life, their crystalline matrices pulsing with blue-green energy. Zakel watched through the command spire's translucent viewpanes as the human fleet, a ragged collection of angular warships, their hulls scarred from battles the Zapirians had never witnessed, deployed into attack formation. A flicker of unease passed through him. The humans moved wrong. Zapirian doctrine demanded symmetry, precision, the elegant dance of fleet positioning. But the human ships lurched forward in staggered waves, their thrusters flaring erratically, their formations deliberately chaotic. They didn't glide like proper vessels, they lunged, like predators closing in on wounded prey. Quilex, his chief scientist, adjusted the bioscanner's crystalline interface, his antennae twitching in agitation. Their energy signatures are unstable, reactors running at Phi tolerance, they're overclocking their systems. Zackel's mandibles tightened. That was suicide. No civilized species risked catastrophic meltdown for a tactical advantage. The lead human ship, a brutal wedge of armor and weapon pods, suddenly jerked sideways, its thrusters flaring white-hot. A Zapirian targeting array locked onto it. And then the ship split apart, its hull plates detaching in a controlled explosion. No, not an explosion. The outer plating scattered, forming a cloud of debris just as the Zapirian plasma lances fired. The beams lanced through empty space, their energy diffused by the drifting metal. And from within that debris field, the real ship emerged, smaller, faster, its railgun arrays already spinning up. Zackel's carapace went cold. They had shed their own armor to evade fire. A human voice crackled over the comms, not the sterile, modulated tones of a proper fleet officer, but a ragged, adrenaline-edged snarl. Burn them down. The Vanguard shields flared as the first railgun slugs impacted. The crystalline barriers held. Barely, but the humans weren't waiting. Their smaller craft, nimble and vicious, darted between the Zapirian cruisers, their weapons firing not at the ships themselves, but at their engines. Quilex hissed. They're targeting our mobility. They don't want to destroy us. They want to cripple us. Zackel's claws dug into the command console. This wasn't warfare. This was butchery. The humans fought like starving beasts, tearing at tendons, first to hobble their prey before moving in for the kill. A new signal blared across the scanners. Something was launching from the human flagship. Not missiles, not drones. Zackel's secondary eyes dilated in disbelief. Boarding actions were archaic, a relic of pre-space combat. No modern fleet risked melee engagements when energy weapons could reduce enemies to ash at a distance. But the humans didn't care. The pods slammed into the Vanguard's hull, their impact shuddering through the crystalline superstructure. Within seconds, thermal cutters flared crude, brutal tools melting through the Zapirian's elegant bio-armor. And then the humans poured in. Zackel saw them through the internal sensors, clad in powered exoskeletons, their weapons glowing red, hot from overuse. They moved in tight, overlapping formations, covering each other's blind spots with instinctive precision. One figure led the charge, a human female, her armor scorched, her visor cracked. She didn't speak. She didn't demand surrender. She just fired. Her weapon, a hybrid plasma, caster jury, rigged with crude cooling vents, vomited superheated death into the Zapirian defenders. Their crystalline armor, designed to dissipate energy beams, shattered under the raw kinetic force. Quilex's voice was a whisper. They're not just boarding us, they're hunting us. Zackel finally understood. The humans hadn't come to conquer. They'd come to prove a point. And as the first human boot crunched onto the Vanguard's command deck, its owner's rifle sweeping the room with predatory calm, Zackel realized they had succeeded. Section Phi. Anomaly detected. The Vanguard's crystalline corridors pulsed with emergency lighting, the bioluminescent veins in the walls flickering erratically like a dying heartbeat. Zackel's mandibles twitched as he processed the carnage unfolding across his ship's sensor feeds. The humans weren't just boarding. They were systematically dismantling his vessel. His tactical display showed them moving in eerie synchronicity, flanking through maintenance shafts, breaching bulkheads with shaped charges, collapsing defensive positions with brutal efficiency. Their movements were too precise, too practiced. This wasn't desperation. This was doctrine. Quilex's trembling appendages danced across the holographic interface, pulling up a secondary scan. Commander, their armor. It's not standard issue. Look at the modifications. Zackle leaned in, his compound eyes narrowing. The human exoskeletons were patchwork horrors, welded plating, scavenged Zapirian energy cells, rigged into power sources, even crude neural interfaces grafted directly into their spinal ports. One soldier's arm had been replaced entirely with a salvaged plasma cutter, its housing cracked and leaking coolant. They weren't just soldiers, they were scavengers, and they had turned the Vanguard's own technology against it. A proximity alert shrieked. Zackle whirled as the command deck's primary hatch buckled inward, its crystalline lattice fracturing under repeated impacts. The humans didn't bother with bypass codes. They simply punched through, their weapons humming with overloaded energy signatures. The lead human, Commander Elizabeth Webb, stepped through the ruined doorway, her rifle's barrel still glowing from sustained fire. Her visor was a spiderweb of cracks, but her stance was relaxed. Almost bored, Zackle's warriors raised their pulse, lances their crystalline carapaces, flaring with defensive bioluminescence. Webb didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. Then, a single word, no orders, no explanation. Sergeant Tyler Chen moved like a shadow detaching from the wall. His modified railgun, a stolen Zapirian grav, coil spliced into a human frame, whined as it charged. The shot wasn't aimed at Zackle. It hit the Vanguard's primary power relay. The ship screamed. Emergency systems flared as the crystalline core destabilized, its pulsing blue-green energy surging wildly through the conduits. Bulkheads sealed automatically, cutting off entire sections. Zackle's warriors stumbled as gravity fluctuated, their equilibrium disrupted by the cascading failure. Quilex gasped. They're not trying to capture the ship, they're sabotaging it. Zackle finally understood the human strategy. They didn't need to kill every Zapirian aboard. They just needed to make sure the Vanguard never flew again. Webb's rifle snapped up, its targeting laser painting a flickering dot between Zackle's primary eyes. Her voice, when it came, was calm, almost conversational. You called us primitive. The Vanguard shuddered as another explosion rocked its superstructure. Somewhere deep in its bowels, a secondary reactor went critical. Now watch, Webb said softly, what primitives can do. And as the first fires began to spread through the dying ship, Zackle realized humanity hadn't just survived their harsh homeworld. They had mastered it. And now, they were doing the same to the stars. The Vanguard was dying. Zackle could feel it in the shuddering deck beneath his feet, in the way the crystalline walls pulsed erratically, their bioluminescence flickering like a failing heartbeat. The air tasted of scorched circuits and molten alloy, thick with the acrid tang of human explosives. His warriors staggered, their exoskeletal armor clicking in distress as the ship's artificial gravity spasmed, sending some crashing into walls, others struggling to stay upright. Quilex's voice crackled through the comms, distorted by the failing systems. Structural integrity at Faye. The humans. They targeted the power conduits. The reactors are, a deafening roar, cut him off as another explosion tore through the lower decks. The Vanguard groaned, a deep resonant sound like a dying leviathan. Zackle's primary eyes locked onto Webb. The human commander stood unshaken, her rifle steady, her expression unreadable behind her visor. The targeting laser between his eyes was a silent promise. That was what the High Council had called them, a young species barely spacefaring, their technology crude, their methods brutish. The Zapirian Dominion had expected compliance, or annihilation. They had not expected this. Webb's voice was calm, almost conversational, as if she were discussing the weather rather than the destruction of a warship. You called us primitive. Another explosion. Closer this time, the deck plating buckled beneath them, revealing the snarling innards of ruptured conduits, their blue-green energy bleeding into the smoke, choked air. "Now watch," she said softly, "what primitives can do." And then the fires came. Not the controlled plasma burns of Zapirian weaponry, not the elegant disintegration of crystalline energy lances. These were human fires, wild, ravenous, spreading like living things. They licked up the walls, devouring the organic membranes that regulated the ship's systems. They crawled through ventilation shafts, igniting secondary fuel lines, turning corridors into infernos. Zackel's secondary eyes flicked to the readouts on his wrist display. The damage reports scrolled too fast to process. Hull breaches, life support failing, engines offline. The Vanguard was not just being destroyed, it was being burned alive. Quilek's voice was a whisper of horror. "They're not just sabotaging us, they're erasing us." Zackel understood now. Humanity had not merely survived their violent cradle of a world. They had thrived in it. They had tamed fire, turned it into a weapon, and now they wielded it with the same ruthless efficiency as they did everything else. This was not war as the Dominion knew it. This was annihilation. And then, through the smoke and the screams of his dying ship, Zackel saw him. A human soldier. No, not just a soldier, a monster. Sergeant Tyler Chen moved like a shadow given form, his armor blackened by soot, his visor reflecting the flames. In his hands was not a rifle, but something worse, a canister. Its surface marked with symbols Zackel did not recognize but instinctively feared. Chen's voice was a growl over the comms. "Burn order confirmed." He hurled the canister into the heart of the Vanguard's primary power nexus. The explosion was not sound. It was silence, a split second of absolute stillness. And then the world turned white. The shockwave ripped through the ship, tearing through bulkheads, vaporizing entire decks in an instant. The crystalline walls shattered, their geometric perfection reduced to glittering shrapnel. The bioluminescent energy cores detonated in a chain reaction, their blue-green brilliance swallowed by the human-made inferno. Zackel was thrown backward, his carapace cracking against the deck. His vision swam, his secondary eyes blinded by the glare. When his senses returned, the Vanguard was gone. In its place was a funeral pyre, and standing amidst the flames, untouched, unhurried, was Commander Elizabeth Webb. She lowered her rifle. "Lesson 1, she said, her voice carrying over the dying ship's death rattle. "Never underestimate what a cornered animal will do." Zackel's mandibles trembled. For the first time in his life, the High Captain of the Zapirian Dominion felt something unfamiliar. Not of death, but of them. The humans had not just fought back. They had answered, and their answer was fire. The Vanguard's wreckage burned in the void, its once pristine crystalline hull, now a shattered monument to human defiance. Zackel's remaining secondary eyes flickered, struggling to process the devastation. His mandibles twitched involuntarily, a biological reflex he had never before experienced, dread. The humans had not simply destroyed his ship, they had humiliated it. The Zapirian Dominion's technology was unmatched. Crystalline armor that could dissipate plasma, bioluminescent shielding that absorbed energy like a living organism, weapons refined over millennia of flawless warfare. And yet, the humans had torn through it all with crude, brutal efficiency. Their weapons were not elegant. They did not sing with the harmonic precision of Zapirian energy lances. They roared, and they left nothing but fire in their wake. Quilek, the Dominion's foremost xenologist, had once dismissed human warfare as chaotic, inefficient, like animals gnashing teeth. Now, his carapace was split open, his tertiary limbs twitching in the wreckage. His last transmission had been a single, fractured thought. They do not fight like we do. They fight to end us. Zackel's remaining crew huddled in the fractured command nexus, their bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically. The air stank of scorched crystal and something else, something organic. Human weapon residue. It clung to the walls, eating into the living architecture like acid. A Zapirian warrior, once proud, now trembling, whispered, "They called them primitive. Zackel's claws dug into the deck. That was the word the High Council had used. Primitive, a species still bound to chemical combustion, to kinetic force, to the crude manipulation of matter rather than the elegant mastery of energy. The human boarding pods had not decloaked. They had slammed into the Vanguard's hull like meteors, their impact alone buckling the crystalline lattice. Then the humans had emerged, clad in armor that looked forged, not grown, their weapons spitting fire and metal. One of them, Sergeant Tyler Chen, had ripped through an entire security phalanx with nothing but a monomolecular blade and a sidearm that fired explosive rounds. Explosives, like something from the Dominion's pre-spaceflight history. And yet, when the dust settled, it was the Zapirians who lay broken. Zackel's communicator crackled. A distress signal from the Dawn Prowler, another Dominion cruiser engaging the human fleet. The transmission was frantic, distorted. They're using nuclear ordnance in atmosphere, their own planets. Then silence. Zackel's blood ran cold. Nuclear weapons, the Dominion had outlawed them 10,000 cycles ago. Too messy, too wasteful. But the humans had not just kept them. They had perfected them, and now they were turning them against the very ships that had come to claim Earth. Outside the shattered viewport, the human fleet moved, not in the graceful, synchronized arcs of Zapirian formations, but in a swarm, unpredictable, relentless. Their ships were ugly things, angular, armored, scarred from battles the Dominion had never witnessed, and at their heart, the indomitable Commander Elizabeth Webb's flagship. She stood on its bridge, watching the Vanguard burn. Zackel had thought her reckless. Now he understood. This was not recklessness. This was calculation. The humans had known the Dominion would come, and they had prepared, not with superior technology, not with grand alliances, but with the one thing the Zapirians had never accounted for. A final alert blared, a proximity warning. The Indomitable's railgun arrays were charging. Zackel closed his primary eyes. Primitive, they had called them. And now, the galaxy would burn for that mistake. Section Fe. The fire speaks. The Indomitable did not fire. It waited, a predator coiled in the void, its railgun arrays humming with restrained annihilation. The silence was worse than any barrage. A deliberate, calculated pause that scraped against Zackel's nerves like a blade, drawn slowly across bone. His command spire flickered with emergency lighting, the crystalline panels fractured, leaking arcs of blue-green energy. The Vanguard was dying around him, its organic systems hemorrhaging, its pulse fading. His crew moved in frantic silence, their bioluminescent markings dimmed with shock. They had never seen a ship like this, never imagined one. The humans had no right to build such a thing. Zackel's secondary eyes twitched toward the tactical display. The human fleet was not just moving, it was hunting. Their formations were chaos given purpose, ships darting between the wreckage of his advance wing, using the debris as cover, as weapons. A cruiser, Zephyr's Light, erupted into fragments as a swarm of human torpedoes detonated inside its exposed energy core. No warning, no demand for surrender, and silence. Quilek staggered to his side. His carapace plates cracked along the left flank, leaking ichor. "They're hurting us," the scientist rasped, his voice modulator glitching. "The gaps in their formation. They're not flaws, they're traps." Zackel knew. He had seen the patterns too late. The humans had studied them, not their technology, not their tactics, but them, their instincts, their arrogance. Every move the Dominion made, the humans had anticipated, countered, turned against them. And now the Indomitable waited, its railguns trained on the Vanguard's crippled engines, not to destroy, to cripple further, to leave them adrift. A new alert flashed, a transmission, incoming, unencrypted, deliberately so. Zackel hesitated, then he gestured for it to be played. The bridge holodisplay flickered, resolving into the image of a human female. Commander Elizabeth Webb, She stood on the Indomitable's bridge, her posture relaxed, her eyes cold. Behind her, the human crew worked in disciplined silence, their movements sharp, efficient. No panic, no hesitation, only purpose. "You called us primitive," Webb said, her voice calm, almost conversational. "You thought we'd break, that we'd beg." She leaned forward slightly, and for the first time, Zackle saw the scars along her jawline, the cybernetic glint beneath her collar, a soldier's marks. "You don't understand fire," she said. "You see it as destruction, as waste." Then she smiled. "But fire cleans, the transmission cut." A heartbeat later, the Indomitable fired, not at the vanguard, at the Dominion's retreating reinforcements. The railgun rounds struck with surgical precision, shredding through crystalline hulls, detonating power cores in a chain reaction that turned the void into a storm of blue-green fire. Zackle watched, his mandibles clenched. This was not a battle. It was a demonstration, and the message was clear. You came to conquer. Now learn what it means to burn. Section. Fey. Fleet-wide. Panic. The Vanguard's bridge was silent. Not the quiet of discipline, but the stillness of shock. Zackle's claws flexed against the command console, the bioluminescent panels beneath his fingers pulsing erratically, a reflection of the chaos unfolding across the fleet. His secondary eyes flicked across the holographic display, watching as the human warship, Indomitable, carved through the retreating Zapirian reinforcements like a blade through water. Each railgun strike was precise, brutal, not a single shot wasted. The humans had let the Vanguard live. That was the most terrifying realization of all. Quilek's tendrils trembled as he analyzed the data flooding in from the shattered remnants of the Dominion's support fleet. The humans had not just defeated them, they had humiliated them. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards, their technology lacking the elegance of crystalline biocircuitry or organic energy flows. They had adapted. The Indomitable's armor was layered with reactive plating, designed to absorb and disperse energy blasts rather than deflect them outright. Its railguns fired slugs of compressed tungsten, accelerated to speeds that bypassed shield harmonics entirely. And the missiles, Quilek's mandibles twitched. Each warhead was a self-contained nightmare, some detonating in fractal patterns that overloaded point defense systems, others burrowing into hulls before erupting in silent, oxygen-fed firestorms. This was not the work of primitives. This was the work of predators. On the Indomitable, Sergeant Tyler Chen exhaled slowly, his fingers dancing across the targeting console. The Zapirian ships burned beautifully, great, blooming spheres of blue-green fire as their crystalline power cores ruptured, spilling luminous plasma into the void. He had expected panic, desperation. Instead, the alien fleet was freezing, like prey realizing it had stepped into a snare. Chen grinned. Zackle's mind raced. The humans had lured them in, let them believe this would be a simple conquest. And now, with a single salvo, they had shattered the illusion of Zapirian superiority. His comms officer hissed, crest flaring in distress. "High Commander, the Eclipse reports catastrophic damage. Their core containment is failing." Zackle didn't respond. His gaze was locked on the Indomitable, its angular hull silhouetted against the dying light of his fleet. Commander Webb's words echoed in his mind. "You don't understand fire." And now, he did. Fire was not just destruction, it was control. The humans had let them burn their own reinforcements, had forced them to watch as their might crumbled. The bridge shuddered as another distant explosion rippled through the void. Zackle made his decision. "Full retreat," he ordered, his voice hollow. "Signal the fleet. Fall back to the rally point." Quilek turned, his bioluminescent markings flickering in disbelief. "You would yield?" Zackle's secondary eyes darkened. "No," he said softly. "I would survive." Because now he understood. The humans had not come to fight a war. They had come to end one section, Faye. The Inferno Protocol, The Zapirian fleet burned, not in the way of starships torn apart by conventional weapons. No violent detonations or glittering debris fields. This was something slower, more deliberate, like embers consuming parchment. The crystalline warships darkened from within, their pulsing blue-green cores dimming one by one as the human weapon did its work. Zapkal watched through the fractured observation pane of his flagship, Ascendant Dawn. His mandibles twitched in a reflex he hadn't felt since his larval stages. Something primal, something like dread. The humans had not simply attacked his fleet. They had infected it. The weapon had no name in the Zapirian lexicon, no known classification. It had slithered into their systems like liquid shadow, bypassing quantum encryption as if it were child's scribbles. Quilex had screamed when it first manifested, a jagged fractal code blooming across every screen, its edges pulsing crimson. By the time they severed primary data links, it was already in the reactors, and then the cores began to starve. Zapkal's claws flexed against the command console, the bioluminescent surface flickering erratically under his touch. Across the fleet, the same nightmare unfolded. Warships drifting, their crystalline spires gone dark, their organic energy flows choked off at the source. The humans had not just defeated them, they had unmade their technology. A chime sounded weak, distorted. The Dawn's last functional comm relay. Zapkal forced himself to turn, his carapace rigid with the effort of maintaining composure. The holographic projection sputtered into existence, resolving into the face of Commander Elizabeth Webb. She looked calm, not triumphant, not gloating, just calm, as if she were reviewing a supply manifest rather than the annihilation of an empire's pride. Behind her, the bridge of the Indomitable hummed with quiet efficiency, human crew moving like components of some vast, unshakable machine. "You're retreating," Webb observed. Not a question. Zapkal's secondary eyes darkened. "You left us no alternative." A flicker of something, not quite pity, crossed her features. "There's always an alternative." The transmission ended. Silence pooled on the bridge, thick and suffocating. Quilex staggered forward, his bioluminescent markings dull with exhaustion. They knew," he rasped. "They knew our systems better than we did." "How?" Zapkal didn't answer. He was staring at the tactical display, at the last flicker of data before the Dawn systems failed completely. The humans hadn't just hacked them, they'd studied them, for years perhaps. Every engagement, every skirmish, each one a test, a probe, another piece of the puzzle slotted into place. And now, they had burned the puzzle to ash. Outside, the void yawned, infinite and indifferent. The remnants of the Zapirian armada drifted like broken glass, their crystalline hulls reflecting the distant light of a star that had, for the first time in living memory, witnessed their defeat. Zapkal exhaled, the sound like wind through dead reeds. Fire indeed. The silence on the Dawn's bridge was not merely the absence of sound. It was the absence of certainty, the absence of victory, the absence of the unshakable belief that had carried the Zapirian dominion across 1,000 star systems. Zapkal's talons flexed against the command console, the crystalline surface humming faintly beneath his touch. The display before him was a graveyard of data, flickering remnants of their fleets once, proud formations, now reduced to scattered debris and dying energy signatures. The humans had not just defeated them, they had unmade them. Quilex stood beside him, his bioluminescent markings dimmed to a sickly teal, the glow of his body flickering like a dying ember. His mandibles twitched, a nervous reflex, as he scrolled through the wreckage of their own encrypted systems. "They didn't just bypass our firewalls," he murmured, voice hollow. "They rebuilt them from the inside." Zapkal did not respond. His gaze was fixed on the viewport, where the shattered remains of their armada drifted in the void. The human warships, angular, brutal things, forged from dark alloys and scarred by battle, moved among the wreckage with methodical precision, not scavenging, not looting, studying, Every engagement, every skirmish, every time the Zapirians had dismissed their crude weapons and reckless tactics, it had all been a test. A slow, deliberate dissection of their weaknesses. And now, the humans had struck with surgical precision. A chime sounded, an incoming transmission, not from the human fleet, but from the Dawn's own surviving systems. A recorded message, buried deep within their archives. Zapple hesitated, then activated it. A holographic projection flickered to life. Commander Elizabeth Webb, her face unreadable, her voice calm. "You're wondering how we did it," she said, as if she had anticipated this moment. "You're wondering how a species you deemed primitive could dismantle an empire in a single stroke." Her image tilted its head slightly, and for the first time, Zapple saw something in her eyes that unsettled him more than any weapon. "Understanding. We didn't just fight you," she continued. "We learned you. Every battle, every retreat, every time you thought you had us cornered, we were watching, adapting. Because that's what we do." The projection flickered, then shifted, showing not just human ships, but the wreckage of a dozen other civilizations, species the Zapirians had conquered without thought. "You've spent centuries believing you were unstoppable. But we've spent our entire existence surviving things that should have killed us." The transmission ended. Quilex exhaled sharply, his bioluminescence pulsing erratically. They used us," he whispered. "Every engagement, every skirmish, they were gathering data, not just on our ships, but on us." Zapple's crest flattened against his skull, a primal reaction to a threat he could not claw apart. The humans had not just outmaneuvered them, they had outthought them. Outside, the void remained indifferent. The stars burned cold, and the wreckage of the Zapirian armada, once a beacon of invincibility, now drifted like ash on the wind. Fire indeed, the silence on the Celestial Mandate's bridge was absolute. Not even the hum of the crystalline power cores dared to disturb the weight pressing down on Zapple's thorax. The human transmission had ended, but its echoes lingered, not in the air, but in the minds of every Zapirian present. Quilex's bioluminescence flickered like a dying star, his neural filaments twitching as he processed the implications. The humans had not merely fought, they had studied. Every skirmish, every retreat, every seemingly desperate counterattack, all of it had been a calculated move in a game the Zapirians hadn't even realized they were playing. Zapple's claws flexed involuntarily, the razor-sharp edges scraping against the organic alloy of his command throne. His instincts screamed for action, for retribution, but for the first time in his long military career, he hesitated. The humans had not just matched them, they had outmaneuvered them, and now, the proof floated outside the viewports. The shattered remnants of the Mandate's once proud armada, drifting in the void like broken husks. A single thought pulsed through his mind, cold and undeniable. We underestimated them. On the human vessel Phoenix Rising, Commander Elizabeth Webb exhaled slowly, her fingers hovering over the final command sequence. The bridge was dim, lit only by the soft glow of tactical displays and the distant starlight filtering through the reinforced viewports. Beside her, Sergeant Tyler Chen stood motionless, his expression unreadable. "They're not responding," Chen said quietly. Webb's lips thinned. "They will." She had seen the data. The Zapirians were proud. Yes, but they were not fools. Their technology was advanced, their empire vast, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Not truly. The Phoenix AI chimed softly, a single notification blinking on the central holo, display incoming transmission. Webb allowed herself a small, grim smile. The Zapirian bridge shuddered as the new signal sliced through their compromised comms array. The holographic projection flickered to life once more, but this time, it was not a recording. Commander Webb's face filled the display, her gaze steady, unyielding. Behind her, the Phoenix bridge hummed with quiet efficiency, a stark contrast to the fractured tension aboard the Mandate. "High Commander Zackle," she said, her voice devoid of triumph. "Only certainty. You've seen what we can do. Now you have a choice." Zackle's crest flared in reflexive defiance, but Quilek stepped forward before he could respond. The scientist's bioluminescence pulsed erratically, his voice barely above a whisper. Webb's eyes flicked to him. Surrender or annihilation. The words hung in the air, heavier than the gravitational pull of a dying star. Zackle's mandibles twitched. Surrender was unthinkable. The Zapirian dominion did not yield, not to anyone. And yet, his gaze drifted to the tactical readout. The human fleet had not just survived their assault, they had adapted. Their ships now bore modifications that mirrored Zapirian energy signatures, their weapons calibrated to bypass crystalline shielding. They had taken the Dominion's own technology and turned it against them, and worse, they had done it mid-battle. Quilek's neural filaments trembled. "They learned from us," he murmured. "Not just our weaknesses, our strengths. They integrated them." Zackle's claws dug deeper into the throne. Outside, the void remained indifferent. Stars burned cold and distant, their light unchanged by the conflict unfolding beneath them. The wreckage of Zapirian warships drifted silently, their once gleaming crystalline hulls now dark, their energy cores extinguished, and among them, human vessels waited, not in triumph, not in vengeance, but in readiness. Because humanity had survived worse than this, and they would survive again. The silence of the void was deceptive. Zackle's command throne pulsed with erratic energy, its crystalline latticework flickering as if infected by the same dread that coiled through his veins. The tactical display before him was no longer a map of assured victory. It was a graveyard. His fleet, once an unstoppable tide of blue-green radiance, now lay fractured, their shattered hulls drifting like the broken exoskeletons of fallen warriors. And among them, the human ships waited, not as predators, not as conquerors, as survivors. The realization struck him like a plasma lance to the core. The humans had not simply endured their assault. They had evolved in the midst of it. Their vessels, once crude by Zapirian standards, now bore the scars of rapid, brutal adaptation. Their armor shimmered with stolen energy signatures, their weapons humming with frequencies that bypassed crystalline shielding, as if it were mere glass. Quilek's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the thrum of failing systems. "They did not just counter us, they absorbed us." Zackle's claws flexed, the edges scraping against the throne's smooth surface. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had crushed species that dared resist the Dominion's will. But this was something else. The humans had not fought like warriors. They had fought like fire, unpredictable. On the bridge of the indomitable commander, Elizabeth Webb exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet for the briefest moment before the suit systems whisked it away. The battle had been brutal, but it was not over, not yet. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up damage reports, casualty lists, power reserves. The numbers were grim, but not hopeless. They never were. Sergeant Tyler Chen's voice crackled over the comms, his usual dry humor absent. "Shields at Fay. Railguns are hot, but we're running low on tungsten slugs, and the Zapirians are still out there." Webb didn't answer immediately. Her gaze drifted to the viewport, where the remnants of the enemy fleet hung suspended in the dark, their crystalline hulls, once gleaming with the arrogance of invincibility, now bore the blackened scars of human defiance. She had seen this before, not in space, not against aliens, but in the history books. In the ashes of wars fought and won against impossible odds, humanity had a habit of rising from its own funeral pyres. Zackle's mandibles twitched. The humans were not retreating. They were not regrouping. They were waiting. His tactical officer's voice was strained. "High Commander, their energy signatures, they're fluctuating, not failing, changing." A cold ripple passed through Zackle's neural cluster. He had studied human warfare, their tactics, their history, and in that moment, he understood. The humans were not preparing to flee. They were preparing to burn. Webb's fingers hovered over the final command sequence. The indomitable shuddered around her, its superstructure groaning under the strain of overloaded systems. The Zapirians had come expecting to face a primitive foe. They had not expected a phoenix. She activated the protocol across the human fleet. Reactors flared to life, their cores igniting with a fury that defied Zapirian understanding. Energy signatures spiked, not in desperation, but in purpose. The humans had not just stolen their technology, they had improved it. And now, they would return it. The void lit up, not with the cold, precise beams of Zapirian weaponry, but with fire, human fire. Zapkel's last thought, before the light consumed him, was not of defeat. It was of awe, because in the end, the galaxy had not given birth to humanity. Humanity had forged itself in the furnace of 1,000 battles, and now it would forge the future. Epilogue. The scars that shined, the silence that followed, was not the quiet of defeat, but the stillness of revelation. The Zapirian armada lay in ruins, their crystalline hulls fractured, their bioluminescent cores dimmed. But they were not destroyed, not entirely. The humans had burned them. Yes, but with precision. A message, not a massacre. Aboard the Indomitable, Webb exhaled, her hands trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what they had just done. The bridge crew around her was silent, their faces illuminated by the dying light of the battle. The Zapirian flagship, once a beacon of cold superiority, now drifted in pieces, its geometric spires sheared clean by human fire. But something moved among the wreckage. Hundreds of them, ejecting from the fractured warships, like seeds cast into the void. The humans had targeted weapons, not escape vessels. The Zapirians were retreating, no, surviving. Webb's lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. Of course, the Zapirians had expected annihilation. They had prepared for it, braced for it. But humanity had given them something worse. And mercy, to a warrior race that had never known it, was a weapon they did not know how to counter. On the surface of the nearest colony world, the survivors of the battle, human and Zapirian alike, watched the sky burn. The humans had not just won, they had rewritten the rules. And somewhere in the wreckage, a single Zapirian comms officer, his carapace cracked, but his mind intact, activated a distress beacon, not for reinforcements, for witnesses, because the galaxy needed to see this, needed to understand. Humanity did not conquer. It changed things, and now so would they.